The director reached over and pressed the other switch that would send the sterilizing bombs up over the west, but he did not depress it fully. He stopped and nodded to Volsek, and again Johann's hand went out, pushing the lever of the switch. He should have brought Stephanie, if only she could have known nothing of the results. She would have been proud of him then, as the director solemnly shook the hand that had done its work, and then the other men began to cluster around him. They moved towards the windows, hesitantly at first, not quite sure that this fire in the heavens over the city beyond was really the safe kind, but the director led them, together with Volsek, and they stood gazing out. It was a huge ball of blazing fire in the sky now, partially softened by the filters that had sprung shut over the windows automatically, and the mutter of its detonation reached them as they stood there. There was some damage, of course, even here. Some of the older wooden buildings near where it had first appeared were bursting into flames, and the distant figures of people who had gone into a panic. They had to believe it was real, just as the West must believe, for a time, that both powers had received the same treatment. Stephanie? But Volsek had taken care of that, with a drug in her coffee. She would be asleep, unaware of the tumult, and not one of the mob, trying frantically to escape what could never harm them. Now the ball of fire was rising upwards more steadily, its own heat driving it up as a blast of hot air was carried up over a flame. The brightness began to fade as they watched, moving up and turning smaller, shrinking, and finally going away. Volsek sighed, and the director echoed it, a satisfied sigh and a somewhat regretful one.
It is hard to see even a few of my people hurting themselves, but it is best, and it is done.
He turned to Volsek, and Johann straightened, reminding himself that whatever the director said must be remembered. He would have to tell Stephanie, and someday he could tell his children and his grandchildren. He must remember it. But the director's words were never spoken. There was a shout from the windows, and they swung back to see another tiny flame leaping up, this time nearer, growing and splitting. There was something wrong with it. The other had grown more slowly. This raged out savagely, growing more sure of itself as it leaped towards them and then darted sideways. Volsek turned suddenly to the instruments packed in the drawers. The spectrovisor and the diffractograph came out in his shaking hands, and he slapped them down onto the wood sill of the window, already beginning to smoke faintly. Then his hand steadied as he adjusted the instruments. One look was enough. This was the nitrogen fusion, not the harmless oxygen reaction. His eyes met the director's, and he nodded, but the nod was unnecessary. The director had already guessed. They moved towards him, a harsh mob sound coming from them, but the director was before them.
No, stop!
The voice that had been trained to command a power greater than men had ever held before stopped them.
No. If the West has scientists too, that is no fault of Johann Volsek. Johann, you did not fail. You will not suffer.
Volsek heard him and saw them fall back. He thought again of the lint on his coat and looked down at it. He picked it off while the others drew back, and the director was assuring him that all would be well with him. Stephanie would have no children now. There would be no grandchildren to hear the director's senseless words, telling him he would not suffer. You don't suffer when you've killed a race.